All right, what's up, everybody? So, of course, something I've talked about for a very long time on the channel is that you shouldn't chase strength because it ultimately defeats the purpose of using strength for hypertrophy in the first place. Chasing PRs for hypertrophy, that in its own nature, I don't think is a good thing, and I want to explain why in this video. But at the same time, I don't want this mindset to come at the cost of actually using PRs for your advantage when it comes to hypertrophy as a metric, because in its nature, hitting rep PRs and increasing weight, when used properly, is actually a very good short-term metric for putting on size. It's a really good indicator that you've built up muscle in whatever lift you're doing. So I want you guys to get a more clear vision on how to use these PRs as a metric, why you shouldn't chase them, but how to actually use them properly, and the mindset to approach them with, because it disappoints me how many people get this wrong. I don't want you guys to be like the lifter I was a few years ago, where I was so incredibly strong, but I didn't have the size to show for it. And it's so disappointing that people end up like that. And I want to make sure that does not happen to you guys, because I was the guinea pig there. I'm sure I'm not the first person that's happened to, but I know how to use them properly. I know how to use the metric properly. Let me share that wisdom that I've gained over the last few years and in my entire lifting career as well with you guys. I think it will help. So PRs are a good thing for hypertrophy. And this doesn't mean 1 rep max. I'm not talking about that today. Today we're talking about adding reps, hitting those little plus ones, as Steve Shaw would say, those little rep increases, whether it doesn't matter what system you're using. If you have some type of progression that involves increasing reps on your lift, which I think 99.9% of people properly training for hypertrophy use anyways, these little PRs are a good thing, and it's something that you should celebrate. But there is an asterisk that this comes with that I want to get across to you guys. So PRs are a good thing for hypertrophy, but they're often used counterproductively. And that's something that disappoints me, because they do have potential to be useful. They are useful. My goal with this video is to set you up with the tools to hit PRs properly and actually hit more of them overall in the long term. And this is something that myself 3, 4, 5 years ago, I wouldn't believe anything that I'm saying right now, because I had a short-term strength-oriented mindset. Now I have a short, mid, and long-term mindset for hypertrophy. And funny enough, I've hit far fewer plateaus when I'm actually training properly and not chasing the metric as the goal. We see so many big and strong bodybuilders on social media, but we don't see how they got there. We just see that they're there. So when we first start lifting, we kind of get spammed with all this stuff on social media. When you look up one thing for lifting on Instagram or follow one person, a lot of stuff gets spammed your way. And when you're seeing these big and strong guys doing these heavy lifts, that especially when you're a beginner, you're shocked at how strong these guys actually are. The further you go into lifting, the more you realize how realistic some of these numbers that these guys put up actually are. But you see their end strength and you associate that with their size. There's also this myth of heavier weights somehow being more stimulative, which is almost true if you look at it in a certain way. But generally, this is a myth, and it's context dependent. But generally, this is not true. So we associate their strength with their size. We chase their strength in hopes to get their size, and this doesn't always turn out to be the case. So we see all these big and strong guys on social media, but we don't see how they got there. We just see that they're there. We falsely associate their current strength being the driver of their progress and aim to get there as fast as possible. Do not be like me, who got the big numbers, and I said I don't have the genetics for size, which is hilarious. And one thing I can tell you, kind of off topic, but the more that I train for hypertrophy, the more people I used to think were fake natties are actually natural now. It's all kind of coming back, and it's all making sense. That is one good thing that I want you guys to take from this video in terms of my personal mindset and experience. All that caring about strength does, and this is to get into the actual PRs and video, part of the video is what I'm trying to say. Can't speak tonight for some reason. All that caring about strength does is motivate you if you're unmotivated to train hard enough to build muscle. It ensures there's enough intensity to grow, but when a metric becomes a goal, it becomes flawed. Don't chase the metric, chase the stimulus and measure with the metric. Chasing the metric incentivizes a mindset and a behavior that seeks shortcuts and loopholes. And this is the paradox of PRs for hypertrophy. You don't want to be chasing them, but you just want to leave them as a pretty solid metric for short-term muscle growth. It's a tough one to try and explain because you're not actually chasing strength to build muscle. You're chasing stimulus. That's what it is. Because when you chase a PR, ultimately what happens is it comes with that asterisk, like I was saying earlier. So when you're chasing strength or you're chasing these PRs, it means, yeah, chase a PR, chase strength, but control the weight, but go through a full range of motion, but use lifts that actually stimulate growth, but take it close to muscular failure or to and beyond muscular failure, but avoid cheating, especially the hard part of the movement, which is what drives hypertrophy. But make sure it's in a moderate to high rep range that stimulates hypertrophy, etc., etc. And this can go on forever. That's just a little, those are the first couple things I thought of off the top of my head. And you'll quickly realize you're not chasing strength. What you're doing is you're chasing stimulus. A rep PR, when you're hitting a new rep max on a given lift for hypertrophy, that the rep max and that higher rep than you've hit before, that little rep PR, it's not strength. Because if you're chasing strength and you're chasing a real PR, there's a bunch of ways you could get more reps and just smash through your PRs quickly in the snap of a finger. Like a little more arch, a little bounce out of the bottom, a little bit more momentum, super fast eccentrics, wider grip, like stuff like this. If you're chasing strength, you'd be doing all that. But it comes with all these asterisks that, what do? When you put these asterisks in front of chasing strength, what does that actually do? It changes the goal from chasing strength to chasing stimulus. Because if you're chasing strength, you wouldn't need the asterisk, right? So you're chasing strength, but there's 9,000 other things you have to focus on for the strength to actually matter. So this is why I don't like the idea of chasing strength. You want to hit these rep PRs, but it has to be in the context of this, etc., and the list goes on. So this is why I talk about how to make your sets as effective as possible. This is why I talk about the range of motion, what part of the range of motion you should be focusing on, what lifts are best to actually drive hypertrophy in the first place. These are all things that matter a lot. Let's keep going on here. So to get strong on a movement, especially in a quick fashion, you want to learn how to properly cheat, how to avoid the harder parts of the range of motion, which always happen to be the most stimulative, right? Look at powerlifting. And you want to leave some gas in the tank so you can recover. So real quick, let's look at powerlifting. So when I was at my peak strength and I was chasing strength, the power lifts are just the best example. This isn't the best way or the only way to get strong. But when you're looking at lifts like the big three, you look at the bench, you widen your grip, you arch more, you bounce out of the bottom, or technically you have to do a pause, but you can go super fast and just catch it right at the bottom, which not controlling the descent, not good for hypertrophy. Same with the squat. You can go from a quad dominant squat, which is great and stimulates your hips and quads pretty well, to a more hip dominant, which kind of hides your quads. A lot of people don't realize how weak your quads actually are. I was humbled when I learned that a couple years ago because I thought my quads were strong, but it turns out it was all hips. You go low bar, wider stance, instead of going all the way down, you maybe still go all the way down but bounce out of the hole, or you just stop right at parallel so it technically counts as a squat. Same with the deadlift. You can go at super wide sumo stance. Like there's all these little tricks to just maximize strength. But what do all these tricks do? They get rid of the tough part of the range of motion. They get rid of the controlled eccentric. They get rid of the lengthened portion of each lift for the muscle that's being targeted there. And that is stuff you want to avoid for hypertrophy. You can get strong in a almost a partial rep. And In certain cases, I think powerlifting is almost partial reps, but a lot of people will say, well, this is powerlifting, that's not hypertrophy, it's two completely different things. But the same principles of getting strong in powerlifting can apply to hypertrophy lifts too. Maybe they're just not quite as prevalent and they're a little bit easier to avoid. But you can get strong in a non-stimulative range of motion in a partial rep, even of a lift that's good for hypertrophy. So take a squat, for example. A powerlifting squat, it's not that good for hypertrophy, especially if you're built like the average person like myself, where I kind of have longer limbs and I'm more hip dominant. So there's these little things. Powerlifting is a more obvious way to see it because the lifts are big and they involve bigger muscles and bigger joints. But those same principles of cheating to lift more weight there applies to these smaller hypertrophy lifts, just on a smaller scale. It's something that you should be aware of, in my opinion. When it comes to hypertrophy, you want to use the most weight that you can while maintaining the asterisks necessary to come with it. This is the buffer room between the best weight to use on a lift and the most weight you can possibly use on a lift. So there's a spectrum of weights that are all stimulative. There are some that are way too heavy, so the very top high end of the spectrum, this is going to be lifts that are weights that you probably use for a peak powerlifting strength. They might grow you a little bit of muscle, but it's the most you can possibly lift, and it's definitely not the optimal weight to use for hypertrophy that allows for the best technique and the other asterisks that I talked about. There's also another side of the spectrum where, yeah, can you lift super light and just mind-muscle connection the entire rep and the entire range of motion? Sure, it's probably not going to do a whole ton because a lot of that's just manufactured tension that's not real. You're kind of forcing it. And of course, that's going to work a little bit too, but it's really somewhere in the middle, and you just have to find out what weight that is. The way that I like to view this is challenge yourself as much as you possibly can, the heaviest weight that you can possibly use while maintaining these asterisks. To put it simply, the heaviest weight you can possibly use with the best technique that you have for hypertrophy. And at this point, worst case, if you start to slip a little bit, you're not too far off from the weight that's best, and you just have to do a little technique reset, and that's totally fine. It's okay to drop weight a little bit. It's okay to use the same weight and get less reps as long as you're within a reasonable rep range for hypertrophy. That should be fine. It's good to be aware of this regularly too, so I suggest filming your sets if possible. One other point for you guys here, and this is a piece of advice that I wish I took when I was younger. Use multiple metrics and you'll be less attached to strength. And the funny thing about this is a lot of people will say, oh, well, if you don't care about strength, you're not going to get strong. I've hit more PRs over a longer period of time training like this and being less attached to it than when I was primarily focusing on strength. That led to far more plateaus because you have no buffer room. You're pushing it all the way to the limit and you're not building as much muscle in the meantime. Focusing on chasing stimulus and building muscle, yes, in the short term, I'm hitting less PRs or just smaller PRs in general, but they keep going forever. And the best bodybuilders, even naturally, they don't plateau that much. I never plateau. And that's not, it's a tough thing for people to wrap their head around, but like, I genuinely don't remember the last time I plateaued. It's just a very, very gradual increase in reps and increase in strength. It's like you don't notice it until you look back. When I look at my training logs from a month ago, 3 months ago, a year ago, I've gotten so much stronger, but I haven't focused on it because I'm focusing on the stimulus from the lifting sessions. And ironically, that gets you stronger. People call me weak because I don't chase strength. They just assume I'm this big, weak guy. I don't get these comments that much anymore, but people used to comment on the channel like, well, what's the point? You're just big, but you're weak. That's stupid. And it's like, I'm not the strongest guy ever, of course, but I'm pretty strong. I'm probably stronger than, I don't know, 90% of people on YouTube Fitness. Like, I'm still getting very strong. So if strength is something that you care about, it definitely comes as a secondary to hypertrophy. It's very specific to what you're training, of course, but like, yeah, I mean, you're getting strong when you build muscle. It's pretty straightforward. Muscle is a big factor in gaining strength. I don't think you should chase it, but it is what it is. So another point here is that strength can become, actually, no, I didn't finish my last point. I think my ADHD is too bad. I get distracted way too easily. But use multiple metrics and you'll be less attached to strength. So weigh yourself, take progress photos, and measure your muscles. Those three things are key. They're so important for measuring your progress and making sure you're building muscle. When you have multiple metrics, if your strength seems a little off for 1 or 2 weeks, but your progress photos, your measurements, and your body weight are doing fine, you're less concerned about your strength. You don't have to, basically, if something goes a little bit off in your strength and your performance, it can mess with you, and you might make wrong decisions to optimize strength and get an artificial extra rep just to feel good about yourself. When you have multiple methods of measuring progress, that takes some of that stress off of worrying about your strength. And this is something that I utilize all the time now with myself, with all my clients. It's helped a ton. Really good for your mindset. And of course, measuring progress, right? So next point, strength can become a distraction for weaker lifters who don't want to be seen lifting lighter weights. My advice to you guys is to remember why you're in the gym in the first place and use multiple metrics, like I just said, to measure hypertrophy to avoid getting caught up in strength numbers. You see these big, strong guys on Instagram. I get it. Natural, not natural, it doesn't matter. You see these guys that are big and you see the big weights. Trust me, most people start very weak in the gym. It's those bigger guys that have the most sympathy for you and the most empathy for you because they didn't start big and strong. There's nothing wrong with using lighter weights. In the short term, don't be weak. And when I say weak, I mean mentally. Stay weak in the gym physically so you can build muscle and get stronger in the mid to long term. If you chase a little bit of strength in the short term, yeah, maybe you can use 10-20% more weight, but you're plateauing yourself there. All of you beginner, weaker guys that, and there's nothing wrong with that, by the way, I'm not saying that like a derogatory way. If you go towards that high end of the spectrum, like I was talking about earlier, in terms of the most weight you can use, you're putting yourself right on the edge of a plateau. I'm telling you, take the mid to long term mindset. Your most stimulative weight is the lighter weight. The heavier weight is not more stimulative. Use the lighter weight. Master that. In the reps, the PRs will add up. You'll be strong before you know it. Lifting, it goes by fast. It's like you see these guys that have been lifting for 10 years. I've been lifting for 7 years at this point. It flies by. You'll be strong before you know it, and you won't even think twice about it. Build muscle, build your base now, and you'll be good. I promise you. I've been there before. I've trained a ton of people that have been there before. I've been doing this long enough. This is genuine from the heart advice that I want you guys to take if you are a beginner. When it comes to stronger lifters, strength can also become a distraction for other reasons, because these people who prioritize strength simply because they're good at it or for ego purposes, which is the signature basement bodybuilding power building phase. I was gifted in terms of strength. If I have a genetic strength, that's what it is. It's actual physical strength. I'm very strong naturally. Like the first time I walked in the gym, could probably deadlift 400 or something. Like I don't know, that's just kind of an exaggeration, but it didn't take me long to get strong. It took me long to get big. So for myself, people would see my strength and they'd see me and think, oh, I'm just kind of a beginner. But then I'd go and do these lifts that are stronger than the intermediate guys, and that fed my ego, because guys would come up to me and say, holy shit, I didn't know you were this strong. That's ridiculous. How do you do it? And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I feel kind of good about myself, so let me maximize this. And I incentivized myself to focus on strength so much, but it was at the expense of size, which is what I truly wanted. So we're drawn to do things that we're good at. From personal experience, maximizing something that you're good at isn't nearly as fulfilling as maximizing something that you actually want and desire innately. I think that's very important. That's a lesson that I have definitely learned in my time lifting. To finish off this video, I want you guys to chase stimulus. Do what I do. And the people that say that they're chasing strength but do it properly for size, they're not really chasing strength. They're chasing stimulus. And I want you guys to focus on this. Celebrate those little rep PRs because they are important. They'll happen less often, especially in the short term, but they'll still happen. But they'll be a real indicator of muscle growth, and they'll actually mean something at this point. And when you train properly, those rep PRs, they last forever and they keep going. And that's my goal to help you guys with on this channel. So I hope this video made sense. I hope you guys learned something from this. Definitely leave some comments if you have questions or have any other experience or advice for other people in the comments. I will see you guys in 2 to 5 days. We'll see.